Okay, so please, if everybody just take your seats so we can continue with the program. So we have invited here a panel of discussants from different sectors of Finnish society. We have Paulina Ahokas, who is the managing director at the Tampere Hall, which I learned today is the biggest conference hall in Nordic countries.
Concert, cultural and congress hall.
Yes, welcome. Then we have postdoctoral research fellow Elomäki from the University of Helsinki, chief economist Ilkka Kaukoranta from the Central Organization of Finnish Trade Unions, SAK, and President Mikkel Näkkäläjärvi, Social Democratic Youth of Finland. Everybody welcome. My name is Maija Mattila. I'm a new project researcher at the Kalevi Sorsa Foundation, and I've been organizing this seminar today. So first I asked you to prepare a short opening statement on the topic, why should we pursue feminist economic policy, and then a visionary statement, how would Finland or any other society with gender-aware economic policy look like? Please, Paulina.
Okay, to start, very good. Thank you. Pleasure being here. I'm really delighted that you invited me, and thank you very much for the keynotes and presenters before. Well, first of all, I would love to add as to why do I think I have been invited here. It was really brilliant to hear when Anita spoke about Sweden. I have to say that I'm really, really proud and happy that not only our government but also our Prime Minister's office has declared feminist, which means that it's not about this party or whatever the party might be, because when Finland turned 100, as the installment of the Finland 100 centennial celebrations, Finland decided to start the first international prize that the Finnish Prime Minister's office gives, and that's the International Gender Equality Prize. And I'm really proud and honored to be the chairman of the election prize winner election board, and have been involved in the process. So it's, I think that might be one of the perspectives on this. Microphone. Okay, yes, I'm trying to speak as closely as possible. Thank you. So, yes, for Finland, this, not only for Finland, but internationally, I personally, and as a country, we believe that this is one of the integral parts, that we really take gender equality forward, because it is a well documented and proven fact that societies that take gender equality seriously are the ones that go forward and prosper the best. Finland, in this perspective, is a remarkable example. 100 years ago, we were one of the poorest countries in the world. In the 40s, we still received international development aid, and now, by any measures, take whatever it's economical, whether it's social, whether it's about well-being, whether it's about ecology, Finland tends to be on the very sort of top of the radars and on top of the index, doing very well. And we know that the one singular factor that takes us to be different in the international context is the fact that, the one singular thing that we know has really affected this, that we were able to rise from one of the poorest countries in the world to one of the most prosperous, is the fact that we were the first country in the world to give full political rights to women. So this means not just the ability to be in the workforce, but also be involved in the decision making. This is an incredibly, I still can't believe what a progressive and revolutionary decision this has been a bit over 100 years ago, to be exact. And so for Finland to declare not just a feminist party, one of them or three of them or five of them, or a feminist government, but to really declare that gender equality issues are not, are our cornerstone, not just now, but also in the future, is a very radical decision and a very, I would say, the one singular thing that I believe that is in the core of our future success as well. So this is a topic that I believe very passionately about personally. So this is not my job. I don't get paid for this. In fact, I need to pay quite a bit to be involved in this process. But it's something that I personally believe strongly about. And there are a lot of I see myself as perhaps in this panel also representing the private sector, so to speak. A company owned by the city, yes, but 11% of all of our incomes, out of all of our incomes, 11% is by some public money. So we are a private company. But in Finland there's a lot of other entrepreneurs. I can name very quickly 100 companies in Finland in the core values out of and the core competitiveness somehow is based on their articulated gender equality. Not just not just values but measures. A lot has been said about why it is important and what does it all of you spoke so eloquently, both Zita, Özlem and Anita spoke really well about why is it useful to invest in it in gender equal economic policy. But yes, in societies with women in the decision making, not just in the workforce but also in the decision making, there is just simply more well-being. It is proven and it's scientifically researched that the most efficient way to stabilize a society and to bring measurable well-being into a society is by having women in its decision-making. And then also, there's also broadly proven facts that companies with well-balanced and/or women in their leadership, they're just simply more efficient. Not necessarily growing the biggest, but they are the most efficient. So, to me, I don't think we need more justification as to why we should pursue it. It's a lot of the decision making in the world at the end of the day, and I can't see how it would be changed, would be forever justified on the measures of economy. So it's let's just then work on those measures and use that articulation and that reasoning. Then, should we already go into how to pursue a feminist policy?
Not yet.
Okay,
I think we make a first round with the first question. So please, Anna.
Thank you. So about the why should we pursue feminist economic policy? I mainly see two different reasons for it, and the first one is that we have all this research now that points us very clearly that economic policy, when made in a gender-biased or gender-blind way, can have drastic negative effects on gender equality. Just look at all the international research about the effects of austerity on gender equality, and you see this really clearly. And if governments are really committed to promoting gender equality, like they are committed and also obliged through different international treaties, then it's really clear that what follows is that you just can't leave economic policy out of the equation. You need to really bring the gender perspective in it. I mean, gender-blind economic policy can destroy in a moment decades of gender equality work. And the other reason is that that came really well clear in your presentation, that austerity has not been a successful strategy. And there's all this research now that proves us that gender-aware economic policy, it makes economic sense, and that the types of social investments that are really at the core of what many call feminist economic strategy, they create jobs, they increase growth. So it's not only about gender equality being a value as such, but about also it making economic sense. Should I say something about the vision too?
Yes, please.
Yeah, so the vision, how I see feminist economic policy or gender-aware economic policy is that it does not only mean that we would somehow do economic policy differently, but what's even more important is that we see and understand economy differently. That we somehow rethink what the economy is and for whom the economy is for. And I give just 2 examples of what this might mean then in practice. So the first point is that if we broaden our understanding of the economy and of the activities seen as economically valuable, what would follow is then that unpaid work and care should be understood as a crucial part of the economy as a whole, and their economic value should also be seen. And the second thing that would kind of have to happen if we would really want to rethink economy is that we have to also rethink the goals of economic policy. So at the moment, the economic policy in Finland, but also elsewhere, it's a lot based on the ideas of competitiveness, reducing public debts, economic growth. But what if we would rethink the goals of economic policy? What if we would actually see that the purpose of economic policy is to support the well-being of people and environment and equality? That would lead to very different outcomes.
Thank you.
Gender equality, I think, is a value in itself. It's like human rights. We don't have to justify it because of its good effects on GDP or economic growth. Even though I'm sure gender equality and human rights do have a positive impact on the economy as well, but that's not the reason why we pursue them. I think it's obvious the policy must not and cannot be gender blind. We have to take into account the effects on the different effects on different genders when doing policy. But at the same time, I think we must not over politicize feminism and gender. I think we need feminist policy, but we can't equate feminist policy with left-wing policy. We can't equate feminist economic policy with anti-austerity policy. I think it's important to see that there are feminists on all sides of the political spectrum, and we have to look for those feminist causes that unite us regardless of party line. I think the debate on parental benefits in Finland is a good example of this, where the political left and political right see it along similar feminist lines, and that sort of attitude we need more of. Over politicizing or alienating the right-wing feminists would be detrimental to the feminist movement in itself.
Thank you, Mikkel.
Hi, good afternoon, and thanks also for interesting and impressive presentations. And there were lots of very interesting comparison, especially in Nordic states, and we saw quite straightly that we have some differences and some issues also, especially concerning in structures and labor markets in Finland, especially. But more about that later. So why it's important to pursue feminist politics? It's, well, obviously gender equality is not ready yet, in my opinion, and maybe the 20th century was a time when states, at least in Western societies, developed like things such as civil rights of women. And I guess the 21st century should be definitely the century when economical and social rights and also the cultural aspects of gender equality should be developed even more. Especially, of course, I know most well the Finnish society, and maybe talk in that perspective. But in my opinion, we still have lots of structures which increases inequality and obstructs releasing full potential of people, humankind. And of course, it should be like the great principle of making policy in all political teams that the background of people shouldn't be obstacle on doing things they want to do. And the other question about like vision, how Finland should, what kind of feministic economical policy? Well, it's quite wide question, but at least, in my opinion, we should at least have proper, and we should at least make proper estimates on our policies' influence on gender equality. For example, budget and governmental programs and political programs of parties, there isn't proper estimates on how those affects on gender equality. And I guess there's one concrete thing, because you cannot do feministic economic policy if you don't know how your policy is actually affecting on gender equality, for example. And that's why it's very important that, for example, Tasa-arvo, where Anna is from, they are doing very important research on these things, but we also need proper estimates. That's the basic point, in my opinion. But of course, we need also social reforms, and we need to reform our education, and also get take proper look at our culture in society.
Thank you. By the way, if any of you want to comment on somebody else's points, so just please raise your hand and I will give you floor. Okay, go ahead, Paulina.
I have an immediate question to Mikkel. You mentioned that there are quite a few different policies that obstruct us from getting into a society or gaining a society that is gender equal. Can you say a couple that you think are the most important?
Well, we have quite strong gender roles in society, in my opinion. That's typical. Well, it comes from schools, our school system, and what kind of things we appreciate on.
Sorry, like I meant, what are the policies? I'm really just genuinely interested. What do you think the policies are behind these?
Well, I don't know. Well, it's about education, so that's maybe a long story, and I don't know if it's like on purpose. I feel it's not maybe on purpose, but it's very not very modern way to think about and it's about educational plans what have been done, but it's also the policies. It's about parental leave system, what Ilkka mentioned about. It's on labor market also, and it's well, our structures of labor market is for example right now they are not promoting gender equality in for example when we negotiate wages of people. The structures are not very good on promoting gender equality. And for example, in Sweden, we have had a discussion about in Finland that should we have some kind of Finnish model on wage policy, and we have took a look to Sweden also, and they have this Swedish model where this. I don't know, export unions sets the limit of making how big wage increases we should make. So that these kind of systems are structural policies which are actually not promoting equality instead of not promoting. But there are some concrete. It's labor markets, wage policies, parental leaves. As we saw in statistics, there are very big differences, and Finland's not doing very well in all sorts of that.
Thank you. I actually wanted to take up the point that Ilkka mentioned that about over-politicizing the gender issue, because I was wondering especially Professor Onaran was saying here was that that the public sector needs to be, we need to invest in the public sector in order to make the gender equality better. So does it mean that whenever we cut from the public sector, we are actually working for inequality? And this, I think, this also links to the question of whether we need leftist or rightist policies, basically. So, please, would you, Ilkka, reply?
Yeah, I think there is no inherent reason why women should work in the public sector, not in the private sector.
Yes.
It's there is no no need for that sort of division of labor. So I don't think it would be at least in an ideal world, simply growing the public sector should not be the way we increase equality. I think it is possible to have a feminist version of austerity policy. I think it's possible to if you want, you can slim down the government, lower the tax burden, and do it in a way that is gender that takes into account gender. That's possible if you want to do it.
Any other comments, Anna?
Yeah. So exactly, decisions about austerity and cuts, they are always political decisions. There's no necessity that we have to cut exactly there. And one big question is also then the relationship between increasing the tax base and cutting spending. The current government we have in Finland made the very political decision to only cut spending as an adjustment. So the government decided to keep the tax base as it is. And the previous government we had made a very different decision. They decided that if adjustments in the public finances are needed, half is going to be made through tax increases and half through cuts. And that's already a big question from a gender perspective. Do we cut public spending or do we increase the income? For example, exactly through increasing capital tax or through some other means. And then even when cutting is for some reason necessary, then you still have a lot of options in terms of where to cut. It doesn't have to be childcare first, in particular when the amounts of savings made through cutting childcare are actually really small in comparison to the overall cuts.
Thank you. And Paulina?
Well, it's I wouldn't like to think that only one type of policy making can own gender equality. I simply can't believe in that. In that case, half of the countries in the world wouldn't have any hope. So I can't believe in that. I'm sorry. So therefore, the question of how to pursue feminist economic policy, I completely agree with Mikkel that first of all, we have to have really concrete measures as to any decision. How does it affect? What is its effect in terms of gender equality? This can be done. You work with tasa-arvovaje,
yeah.
Yes, and there's incredible. You just had a seminar today.
Yes, I can tell.
About you have concrete. You've developed incredible concrete measurement systems as to any policy. What is its gender implications? Let's take a very concrete big thing currently in Finland. Sote, I don't know what sote might be in English, but it's we're completely renewing our communal
social and healthcare system reform.
And healthcare system and how it's reorganized and organized. What are the different sizes of the units that make the decisions and that type of things. And it's one of the biggest reforms in the history of Finland. And we haven't measured, as a country and as decision makers, we haven't measured what are its gender implications. We know that 15% of women will most probably change their employer, and that's a lot. Mm-hmm. And we also know that most of these companies are run by women, that they will be most likely becoming employed by, which is quite, these are two things that are quite interesting. But we as a country, we have to pursue that, any decision that will be made will be first, before it's implemented, will be measured by its gender implications. We have to do it, because we know that this is an integral part of our competitiveness, and we have to also show model that, this is the way that we go forward as a country. And then, so, you are a better professional to speak about these measures. But I have to say that how a feminist economic policy is, really is received. I believe in, targeting a few things. Not trying to solve the whole world. I look at party programs in Finland. I'm not, I'm not declared to a party in Finland. I'm a very, in many ways, a political person at the same time as I'm a very political person. So I look at party programs. In fact, during the seminar beginning, I received messages from 3 party secretaries because I made the question for them: what is the core of their party? Their feminist policy. And the difficulty is that we always try and solve so many things. Any party in Finland and any government in Finland tends to have 168 different things to be changed. And we are a country that believes that if we take small steps to the better, we make it. And that is in a way the core of our competitiveness, that we've taken smaller, careful steps for the better. But in terms of gender equality, things are not moving forward. They haven't really moved forward in Finland for a long, long time. And therefore, I really, really call for a more ambitious policy in terms of gender equality. And the one thing that I believe passionately about is parental care, parental leave policy. It is in the core of our problems, I believe, in many ways, because I see it happening in this society. It's women stay at home to take care of the children. The numbers are just horrific in that sense. And what it brings is that the families learn the fact that the woman takes care of the food, nurturing the baby, nurturing the house, and doing the housework. And when we re-enter the workforce, that's the way. Very few of us have the power to do the same battle as I did to really change that system. Most of us in Finland still are the first nurturers of the family, of the house, of the kids, and da-da-da. And therefore, you just don't have the stamina to really go and do a proper, take your role in the workforce and in the decision making and in the challenging positions. And it's and there's a million reasonings for this, but I personally believe that this is something that we just really have to take care of, have to change it, and just go with more ambitious measures than most of the parties are just talking about. Let's add the daddy leave by 2 weeks. Like what? Sorry, nothing is going to happen with the 2 weeks. It has to be a more ambitious action that will be taken.
So what would be more ambitious? What would be ambitious enough?
Nobody has shown me a better model than 666. Just basically, if there's and this model does apply and it works for any family model. Most people say that what if there isn't a daddy? Just look into the model. It does work even if there is like 2 mothers or just 1 mother or whatever. But it's just taking into account that there usually is, a biological case into having a child, which is a man and a woman. Whether it's even artificial insemination. So it's really dividing the responsibility, and that really it makes a change in this society.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah. Just a comment on the parental leave first, and then I will go back to the gender impact assessment issue. So I agree that the 6+6+6 model is the best one if you add some flexibility and do
Could you please define the 6+6+6?
That you would actually increase the length of the paid parental leave up to 18 months. Now it's somewhere, Ilkka knows the best probably, but somewhere 12, 13
About
months.
10, 11.
Yeah. So that you could actually have a quota for both parents of proper length. So quota of 6 months for the father, quota for 6 months for the mother or for any parents,
for the other
parent, and then the last 6 months would then be left to divide between the parents as they want. But the problem now is that because economy and the idea that we need to be really careful with public finances has become to determine the public debate about parental leave a lot. Now there's quite a broad consensus in different political parties that, well, you know, we can do a proper parental leave reform in a cost-neutral way, which means that this 6+6+6 model that would actually really require additional investment because you are then increasing the paid part of the leave is a bit, it's not as popular anymore as it used to be.
6+6.
Yeah. But but about the gender impact assessment, so as Mikkel said, it's extremely important that we would, whatever types of decisions about the economy we make, we would do them knowing what follows and who's impacted. And to this end, it's crucial that we are able to assess the gender impacts of whatever policies we are planning to propose or the budgets. And this just is not happening at the moment in Finland, and there are different reasons for it. And one of them is that we really don't have enough people at the moment with skills and interests to do this type of gender analysis that would actually require using microeconomic modeling and macro modeling and so forth. It's very difficult work, and we have not yet in Finland really developed the methodologies in the same way that in the UK Women's Budget Group has done, for example. And now the Ministry of Finance just put out on Friday a call for proposals where they are proposing to give 150,000 euros for a group of researchers who would actually develop these models.
Okay, wow.
It's very little money actually to do. This is a huge job, but it's a start. And I find it a positive step that there is actually public funding for this purpose, and there seems to be an understanding in the Ministry of Finance and in the government administration that this is a problem, that we don't know the gender impacts, and there is willingness to develop gender budgeting and to develop gender analysis. That's all great. But the big question is then that even if we would have all the knowledge about the possible gender impacts of specific policies, would this knowledge actually matter? And that's then where different political ideologies and values come into play. So even if we had the knowledge, it might not necessarily be taken into account if it goes against certain type of political or value conservative goals. And we see this really well with the parental leave reform debate at the moment. So there's all this great research produced by Ilkka and others about, let's say, the positive employment effects of reforming our parental leave system. But this data, this very hard data, seems to have no influence because there are political parties that are very value conservative in the government who block the reform and just neglect all the research data we have.
Thank you, Ilkka.
I think on the parental leave system, I think it's possible to have a feminist view and consider that the home care allowance that we do have that promotes long stay-at-home mothers. You can see it from a feminist perspective as a positive thing. It gives money, but the money is primarily targeted towards women. And you can see it as a positive thing in that sense. But its effect on female employment is entirely different. So yeah. I think from a gender perspective, whether you look at the gender budgeting simply at who ends up with the money, you end up at a different result than if you look at the dynamic effects and how it affects employment and all of that. And I think it's important to recognize that even from a feminist perspective, you can arrive at different policy choices depending on what you value most. So it's even if you take a feminist perspective, it's not there is not one single right answer. And I think the discussion about parental benefits and the 6+6+6 model is a sign that where we talk about these reforms but do not implement them. And I think that it shows that for a certain type of reform there is political will to talk about it, and you want to brand yourself as a feminist that supports 666 or other very, very generous policies. But at the end of the day, in an actual budget meeting, the government, as the politician responsible for the budget, you don't want to find the 600 million euros to implement that policy. So there's a disconnect between what you actually want to do when you have to make the decision and what you say you would like to do. So I think forcing politicians to make actual choices, value choices, is important. And in that sense, the discussion with cost-neutral reforms, I think, is a step in the right direction, because it forces politicians to take a value judgment, whether using the money we currently have, would you like to use it in the current way or in a way that promotes female employment? And that's a much tougher choice than supporting a model that costs far more.
Thank you. Mikkel, would you like to comment or?
Oh, very briefly. Well, I try to be brief at least. It's not very easy to politicians often, I know, but I have been thinking just same as Anna mentioned before, that even though we would have all the information, I'm not very confident either that there will be like reform strong enough, because well, I don't know. Well, this is a very good example about that we have lots of knowledge that supports some kind of policies, but still it's like in Finland especially we have totally different election system than in, for example, in Sweden and in Denmark. We don't have these coalitions, and those parties always negotiate with all the parties, not just a couple of ones, which actually makes the decision, makes the politics on very like well, all the parties have 100 goals, and voter actually don't have any idea before election that what are the priorities of the party, because there are lots of goals, and you cannot know what are in the top of the list, and that's a problem, because then you very often in Finnish politics it's foreign politics and economical politics which are dominating the whole discussion of politics, and you cannot find that much political parties and politics who are like strong enough to make reforms which actually have in very high priority, for example, some kind of social politics sectors, and everything are compromises. So what I'm basically trying to say, it's like if you have one reform you want to do, you need a couple of people who really strongly are willing to force it down, because if you don't have any owner of your great idea, you just need one party or one strong politicians to block this. And this is a very good example, this parental leave system right now, because well, I must say that there are three parties in government, and one of them, Kokoomus, they were like kindly quite positive about making reform, but in the same time there was one party, this Finnish party, which were strongly opposing, and Kokoomus was not didn't had that much will on making reform, so they dropped them down. So we have basically, I believe that for example, Ilkka has made a model about parental leave system which costs zero, like basically. I guess that if that model would go to Parliament, it would pass there, but it's not going to Parliament because government are not going to make proposal on it.
Can you tell us, Ilkka, what it is? Sorry.
Well, quite briefly, it's a cost-neutral way of using the current money. It makes it more flexible, so you can use the benefits in a shorter period rather than the current 3 years. And it has 13 months of earnings-related family benefits, and then 6 months of basic level, and it has a 3-month quota for both genders, or both parents. So that increases the father's quota in Finland from about 2 months to 3 months. So it has a gender aspect in that sense.
But what do you think, Ilkka, that would that kind of reform have a majority in Parliament? If
we look at the proposals from different parties, Social Democrats and the Green Party, the Swedish, what are they called? Swedish, yeah.
People's Party.
People's Party, yeah. And Kokoomus, yes. It's very broad agreement that we need a reform in that sort of direction. But as you said, yeah, the way the coalition governments work is that all parties have a veto, and
yes.
And since we always, well, so far we've had coalitions with parties where someone wants to have the veto on this.
So now we are going quite deeply into the Finnish political system, but maybe if I would let our keynote speakers to comment at this point, if you would like, do you have any comments so far for the panel discussion, or I can also give you the floor at the end of the panel if you would like to comment on these discussions that we are having right now. Nothing right now.
No, just say one.
I will give you a microphone, just a moment.
The cost neutrality. I mean, I'm suffering from lack of economic literacy in party politics when they talk about cost neutrality in particular. It's so static. When you give that money to households, it's immediately a cost, of course, but households will do things with this money. And probably, even in the very short run, there will be some return of that to the economy and some self-financing. But I think for me, most importantly, how that money is spent today will have tremendous effects in the next 20 years in the development of that society. This is the idea of going forward. And I am deliberately instrumentalizing gender equality here because in the long run, it creates a better infrastructure for businesses too. It creates a better society, more equal society, but also a better infrastructure, I suppose, for children's development. That will mean a very different thing. If a child is brought up equally by both parents, the cost of that statically today maybe X, but that will so much return back to the community in the 20 years. This is why we need to have models that look into the 20 years if we are talking about state. I'm not talking about here a private equity funded businesses short-term 1-year profitability plan. No offense to private equity funds, but obviously they are known for short-termism, isn't it? So this sort of cost neutrality, if you are interested in costs, please let's put it in 20 years at least, not in 1 year. We can afford more than that in Europe.
So do you think that politicians in Finland think too short-sightedly and not enough long-term in a long-term way? Anna, please.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, whenever a big social reform is being discussed, like the parental leave reform or another debate we had some time ago that was about free childcare, then immediately somebody puts the immediate costs at the table. You know, free childcare would cost municipalities so many 100 millions of euros. Oh, you know, the 6+6+6 model for parental leave, too costly, we can't find the 600 millions, but then we don't really, it seems to me that we don't have the people who would actually provide the kind of more long-term perspective to this. So it's not the people within the ministries who would provide this kind of research. in the research community, we do not, unfortunately, at the moment, have that many people in Finland who would be able to provide this kind of research either, or who would have funding for this kind of research. So it would be tremendously important to have this kind of data, as well as to have the kind of research that you just presented in terms of the new policy mixes and alternatives, but we just don't have the people and the resources at the moment to produce that.
Yeah, Paulina, please.
Yeah, I would like to say here, like completely supporting that. Like I said, in my opening statement, is that it's we just have to face it as a fact. I believe that most decisions in this world will be based somehow on the basis of economy. Now, I worked in the arts and culture for quite a few years, and I've taken as granted that I have to speak the language of economy. So I've always, the past 15 years, I've really spent a lot of time, most of my time, really looking for numbers and really looking for the economical research behind the cases. And I have to say, I've been really lucky and happy to be really successful with it, to really, be able to bring the numbers. So it's, we've discussed this with, for example, Naisasialiitto Unioni today and tasa-arvoneuvottelukunta,
Tasa-arvoasiainneuvottelukunta.
and then the Organization of Finnish Feminist Movements, Naisten-järjestöjen-keskusliitto, that one concrete thing we have to take forward is basically support gender studies in the economics departments, in the to really bring the numbers and to really bring the reasoning from that point of view.
Ilkka, would you like to comment on the cost neutrality or something else?
Yes. I think it's definitely important to take the long-term view also and do the full analysis. But at the same time, it's we must be credible with our numbers and not jump to the conclusion that any social investment pays for itself. All social investments are the same.
Yes.
It's obviously different whether we invest more in maternity benefits or paternity benefits, home care allowance or the earnings-related parental benefits, or cheap free daycare. Within the same sector of family policy, you can do vastly different things with money, and not all of these would have the same impact, and I don't think all of them would have a positive impact. And it's important to look for the numbers, do the full math, but not simply pretend that all social investment is beneficial simply because it is social.
From different value perspectives, you can always reason any action to be beneficial in the future in terms of the economy.
Yeah, especially when you don't do the math and you simply make a story about it. So.
Yeah.
Okay, I think it's time for us to open the floor for audience questions. There we have one. Would somebody please take the mic there?
Thanks a lot. I'm Thomas Wallgren. I'm from here, and I'm an owner that you're looking for in politics. I'm recently elected to City Council in Helsinki, and I would like to invite you to propose at the spot your concrete proposals for eco-feminist progress in Helsinki in the next 4 years. The City Council will produce during the next 4 months a new strategy for the next 4 years for Helsinki. So Helsinki struggles to be the leading champion of eco-feminist politics in the world. So in that perspective, what are the sensational contributions you want to make to our strategizing? And those ideas which you can't present at the moment because of time doesn't allow, or ideas are not fresh enough, please come next Monday, 29th May, to Vallilan Kirjasto for cross-party political strategizing. We're inviting from the City Council different parties with activists with profound, deeply changing ideas so we can make Helsinki a champion of these things. Eco-feminist perspectives and contributions. Thank you.
Thank you. So Any ideas?
Yeah, definitely. One idea would be to build more city, more dense city that is conducive to public transport. Take the current motorways coming to the city and change them to normal streets and build houses for 100,000 people there. At a city that is conducive to public transport is an equal city, and I think there's that sort of equality aspect also. And
that will happen anyway.
well,
Yeah.
I am not quite convinced that those 100,000
Not without
houses
really
are
serious
coming.
land planning. Yeah.
Okay, other ideas? Mikkel?
Oh, well, we have been already discussing about children daycare. That's important, that don't raise costs too much and don't well, I don't know how can it take. So, well, all the kids should have access to daycare. But it's also one very concrete, it's about when you, I don't know if it's already have tried in Helsinki, but when people are seeking jobs, I guess this should be anonymized, this job seeking progress, and I'm very happy and proud of saying that we have already anonymized in our organization, and that has been working quite good in my opinion.
Thank you, Anna.
Introduce gender budgeting. I think somebody has already made in the city council the proposal, and then you could look at other cities in Europe who are already further with it, like Berlin, let's say, organize a seminar, invite people from Berlin to come over and tell how they are doing, and then learn and go forward.
Can I have a comment on that?
Yes, please, just wait for the microphone, please. Mikko is bringing it.
Elizabeth Halanna in the Social Foundation board. Just a very brief comment. I was so envious when Anita Nyberg was explaining that the Swedish government for each budget proposal puts an annex on the gender impact. Why can't Helsinki do it the same? I thought that was a brilliant idea because that forces everyone to think about it, and it also creates a debate. So I thought that was a brilliant proposal.
Thank you. And then comment from Anita Nyberg.
Yeah, I would, when it comes to the municipalities, what you should look at, I think, at least my experience from Sweden, is that you should look at how much money and resources you spend on male sports.
On what? Sorry? On what?
Male sports.
Yeah.
And the police protection around.
Thank you. And one more comment from the audience.
Yes, I'm Sakarian, and I'm a political scientist, but I'm not talking about that. Only a comment that it would be really interesting to analyze. One of our real interest has been this kind of rhetorical analysis and the idea now that different parties are exclaiming to be feminist, what kind of rhetoric is involved in it and how it's being used. But where I really want to come into is what Anita Nyberg was telling. One thing was that you said, as far as the feminist agenda kind of is concerned, feminist economic agenda, that there should be kind of right to full-time work, but possibility for part-time work. That was kind of like the combination, which is kind of interesting. I mean, like if we compare, for instance, the Nordic countries, what really explains also why the employment rate in Finland is much lower is because the part-time, women's part-time work is much less developed. But my point is that in more pragmatic terms, one could say that there could be kind of like right to part-time work and the possibility of full-time work. And this kind of reversal is interesting to make. And it really connects with the precarization discourse. I'm a little bit surprised that when you have been talking, there has been no mention about the kind of like what's going on in the labor markets and the precarization and the part-time. For instance, some of these precarity discuss, I mean, like the researchers want to include part-time work as kind of defining precarity. It certainly can't, I think. And my point to make is that could you a little bit explain what kind of discussions around, or has there been Sweden discussions around this kind of like possibility of part-time work or right to full-time? Because as I know, well, we published for Belgrave a book on precarization. And what I noticed was that there are intense discussions in Britain, in Germany, in other countries between kind of like labor market researchers and these pointing out on the precarization. And now we come to these divisions. Of course, it's the case that I certainly agree that taking the gender issue would also broaden and make what we understand economy to be a kind of like a quite revolutionary idea. But that's one basic division. Actually, when we are doing such a thing, we are introducing that there is no such things as consumer as such, or homo economics as such, or producer as such, but we could introduce any kinds of divisions. And now there are also, in this sense, there are divisions in the position of women in labor market and how this is taken into.
So your question is to Anita Nyberg, if there is discussion in Sweden about this precarization of work, and the question of precarization of work and the question of part-time, full-time work.
Especially of the idea of right to full-time work versus possibility of part-time. Why not the other way around?
Small questions here in the end.
I mean, when women in Sweden entered the labor market in the 60s and 70s, then the norm was the male norm. You should work full-time. But since there was no childcare, or very little childcare, and parental and maternity leave was very short, so women, and there was a big demand for women's work in Sweden at that time. So then eventually it became a lot of part-time work, and that worked for that time. But it doesn't work anymore. And there is also the right for parents to shorten their working time. So there is a right for shorter working time. Yeah. But now the problem is mainly that... But mainly now the problem is that people can't get enough hours. So there have been, I think, at least 3 different investigations trying to change this with law. But also since the social partners are strong in Sweden, and they have a lot to say about working time. So I would say that the only effective time when men's working time was shortened was when working time in general was shortened, from 47 to 45 to 40 hours. Then men's working time was shortened. But women's was also, in spite of the fact that women work part-time.
Thank you very much. I think we have to wrap it up, but I will still very quickly give floor to our panelists here, just in 2 sentences. What is the biggest obstacle in Finland against the gender equality, and what should be done about it? Just very, very quickly, please. It's a big question, but I'm looking for simple solutions.
Well, maybe still the biggest issue is lack of knowledge. When we discuss about equality and gender of equality, it's very superficial. The level, it's not very deep level how we discuss about gender equality. That we have lots of people in Finland actually thinking that because the law says that people are equal and have same rights. Many people are understanding that equality succeeding very well right now. So at least we need more research and more discussion and different kind of estimations and well, I guess that we also need a political will and also time.
Thank you, Ilkka.
Rather than problems and obstacles, I would rather focus on the positives, and I think this growing discussion about feminist economic policy in Finland is a very positive thing, And also looking at government policy, when this government started, the government program was cuts to children's daycare and increasing fees. And what they now ended up doing is quite the opposite. They're now adding funds and decreasing fees. So I see that there is growing political momentum in the right direction, and this is from both sides of the political spectrum, and this is something we should also stop to applaud at times.
Optimist.
Yeah.
Thank you, Anna.
Yeah. And to continue about this momentum, I think it's also true that something has changed in the past couple of years. We have had, I think that a few years ago you wouldn't have heard anyone in public to put the words feminism and economic policy in the same sentence. And now we are here in this seminar, and the main newspaper, Helsingin, has been writing about feminist economic policy, and it has become somehow much more common to talk about the economy from a feminist perspective, and this is a great start. But then we need to continue pushing, because the pressure to make the political will appear, or to at least remind politicians of the need to act, it has to come from somewhere. And where does it come from? Well, you know, it can come from the research community, it can come from the trade unions, it can come from the members of parliament. At the municipal level, we also need actors, so the business community. So I think that it's really a question of how do we want to use this momentum and not let it just disappear.
Thank you, and Paulina.
Yes, I would like to add to this wonderful question that the gentleman made about, you know, how to really pursue this. I think it's about, you know, all of us taking the responsibility of putting pressure on our decision makers, whether it's bureaucrats or politicians, to really keep the issues. I have to agree that I'm really, really delighted how feminism somehow has been rebranded in Finland. And, you know, I think, and I see across Europe in many ways, that it's actually something really positive to strive for. And therefore, I will also, you know, it's IGEP, International Gender Equality Prize, is one of these means. You know, this country, this government, you know, if we keep this thing on the map, that we as a country have, you know, really dedicated into this, you know, on the international field, we have decided to really go forward with this particular issue. If we just keep it forward, so, you know, therefore, as a concrete action, I just go like, you know, 10 days to leave your submission as to who should be the winner. Do it, you know, to show that, you know, there are people in this country and internationally who are interested in this subject.
Thank you very much. I would like to thank, on behalf of the Kalevi Sorsa Foundation, our keynote speakers, Anita Nyberg and Özlem Onaran. I'd like to thank Miha Javornik for coming from Slovenia, or did you fly from Brussels or Slovenia, coming all the way to here. Our panelists, thank you very much. Our audience, have a great evening, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.